Time's up, Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Well, also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that, killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
That's why you can't, monkey boy.
Great Scott. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass!
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Al.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Hail and howdy, everybody. Welcome back to another Saturday Night Drive-In where we sit back, relax, and enjoy quality entertainment. For the most part, sometimes we disagree, but sometimes those are the best ones where we fight. But tonight, we're not going to fight tonight. We're not going to fight. This is a period piece brought upon us by, I don't know where I was going with that. So hi, Jed. How we doing? I got nothing. I started going down a road. I had no way to get off the ramp, so I'm just going to abort and say hi. How we doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be talking about this movie. I had no idea how you were going to react to it. I figured you'd probably like it, but with the two of us, we never know for sure one way or another. But this is a childhood favorite film of mine, so it's been a long time since I've seen
wow.
it. I'm very
Of course,
excited
you
to
had seen it before. Okay, I wasn't sure if you'd seen it before. I mean,
many times.
I've heard it in the background because I had access to a physical copy. I didn't have to go scrounging anywhere. I was able to get a physical copy from my mom. It's part of her collection. So I've heard it in the past. I've heard bits and pieces of it. And you know this. I'm a fan of period pieces. I love period stuff. That late 18th century, early 19th century stuff, it's a fascinating period. One of my favorite stuff is, I have it right there, if you've ever seen it, Poldark. It takes place during that period of time too, from the English side when the Great Terror is going on. I love this stuff. It's great. And I love things that are dropped into history. I love that kind of stuff because with all my useless schooling that has occurred too much dead in my life, I have a history degree, so I do enjoy history. I would just say an amateur historian on stuff like that. So I like this. I enjoyed it, and I like good performances. And within this movie, because it's a movie, first I thought it was a miniseries, but no, it's a full hour, 2 hour, 16
It's
minute
a movie.
Yeah. It's got some good performances in there. We'll get to that. And it's good. It's good. And it's quality. And now there's another version. There's an older version.
There's several.
There's several. This is the one that is, I think, more well known due to its release period of time. Anyway. So let's dive right in. Jed, get us set up.
Well, this film takes place during the French Revolution, which makes it a particularly bloody period piece. Yeah, I've been waiting all stream to give that joke. Wasn't it a great one?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretend Let's go for it.
Well, so yeah, the Scarlet Pimpernel is about the French Revolution, and some of its history is nebulous at best. The Scarlet Pimpernel, I don't believe, is a true historical figure.
No, it's not.
But it
No.
ties into the history in a very interesting way. Scarlet Pimpernel is a English nobleman who is attempting to smuggle French noblemen out of Paris during all the executions, all the guillotine executions that are going on at the time. They're just trying to save lives. They're not really getting involved in the politics. They're just like, hey, this is a lot of murder bad. And that's really all that the Scarlet Pimpernel and his team are up to. And the story unfolds with Ian McKellen Chauvelin, who is an agent for the French government, attempting to discover the identity of the Scarlet Pimpernel. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse game trying to figure that out. But there's one aspect of it that I really want to talk about for a second here. I don't know if this is true, but it felt like it, to the extent that I would not be surprised in any way, shape, or form if it turns out the Scarlet Pimpernel was an inspiration for Batman and some of the early superheroes.
Wow, you touched on a point that I was thinking about it, because I kept watching thinking, okay, we got Batman and his over-the-top Bruce Wayne. I kept thinking,
exactly.
Man, Percy's putting on a Bruce Wayne here. That was my thoughts while I was watching this. Because I'm thinking, wow, that is so over the top, this fop, this fool. Everybody calls him a fool. He's the fool of London. They have no respect, and that's the whole point, to distract from the fact that you're right. It's a classic alter ego scenario. Do you possibly think that this fool is doing these crazy vigilante things? And so I'm right there with you. I was thinking Bruce Wayne, and because I was being because before it got into it, I was thinking, wow, he's being really over the top here with his nobleman behavior. And then, another 5 minutes goes by and it looks like, oh, we're doing a Bruce Wayne thing. Okay. Okay.
And it's better than most Bruce Wayne Batman dichotomies that I've seen in most Batman films. It's very clear the difference between them. The actor who portrays him, I think his name is Anthony Andrews.
Yes.
He does a phenomenal job making this distinction between the two. And just like Batman, the Scarlet Pimpernel is who he really is. When he's alone, when he's with people he trusts, the mask slips away and you see him for the competent man that he truly is, the man who cares. And it's so subtle, even just in his voice. But there are times even when he's using the fool's voice where he's saying things as the Scarlet Pimpernel, but it's clear he's doing that. Like in some of the conversations with Jane Seymour's character, he's using the full voice, but he's saying it with the intensity of Pimpernel. And I just can't get over his performance, all the different disguises. Like he could legitimately be the prelude to the archetype of the superhero, particularly.
And he even is, because he's massively wealthy too. So there's even that going for the whole aspect of it. He's got that Bruce Wayne wealth going for it. Although you say his performance in the end is good. I was a little iffy on it when it started. I realized, okay, before I understood the dichotomy going on here. But to me, the best performances are Ian McKellen and Jane Seymour for me. They are
really
Ian McKellen. There's a level of sincerity I get from his acting. I fully believe he is Chauvin. Chauvelin. Is the L silent?
Chauvelin? I don't think so.
Chauvelin. But I truly believe he is, for me. He was the most enjoyable thing, because I have a predilection to enjoy him as an actor, his emoting, his voice work, his inflection, it was all right there. Ian McKellen never misses a beat in this performance. He never breaks out of it. It's not, of course, this is 30 years before it. I'm not seeing Gandalf in there. I'm not seeing any other role I've ever seen him in, because I've seen some of his other Shakespearean stuff as well. And none of it creeps in there. Ian McKellen completely embodies the role of this antagonist, and it gets me. And of course, and then there's Jane Seymour for me, who her back and forth, her riding the line, her emotional devastation moments as she feels like her life is falling apart. I'm buying it. I'm into it. That, and she's hot.
She's very hot.
Yeah.
I appreciate both their performances, but neither of them come close to Anthony Andrews for me. Like, of course, Ian McKellen does a great job. Jane Seymour did what she needed to, but like didn't stand out to me. Like I'd forgotten she was in this movie. I entirely forgot that it was Jane Seymour.
I
But,
just know because I've seen the cover a ton of times, and she's on the
Mhm.
cover of the DVD case. It's like,
Well, and Ian McKellen, one of the aspects of his character that I love is, like you said, the subtlety of it. Even when the camera is not focused on him, whenever he interacts with Percy after the first conversation with him, he always subconsciously touches his cravat because
yeah, because he criticized
Percy-
him about its
Mhm.
fashion.
and that comes up throughout the entire movie, even at the end in the final fight, which there are a lot of issues with that final duel. It's not all that climactic, but
It's well
the-
choreographed, though. As a
Mhm.
fencer, even though I'm not a saber fencer, it was well choreographed. They had the right movements. They clearly had practiced, and because their parry and repost were well done. But we can get to that later. So
Yeah,
I can comment
do
on,
want
on the
to
physical aspect.
clarify for Frank, though. I'm not saying she was bad in the movie. She was good in the movie. It's just Andrew was just so much better. She's a very attractive woman, very
Hell,
talented woman.
Jane Seymour is one of those ladies that has
Mhm.
only gotten hotter as time moves on.
She aged very well.
She is. Listen, when she was in Wedding Crashers, oh man, it's like wow.
Did
I'm
you ever
so
see a
about that.
movie with her, a time travel movie where this guy like would just he saw a picture of her in this old hotel and got obsessed with her, and so he figured out a way to time travel by getting rid of all contemporary items and just saying the date that he wanted to time travel to. He ended up in the past, fell in love with Jane Seymour, and at the end of the movie, they they just slept together. He gets out of bed, getting dressed, and he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a contemporary penny, like from the 80s, and gets sucked back into the future.
No,
It's such a weird movie. That's the first
that
movie I'd
sounds
ever
like
seen
the
with
that
Jane
sounds like the
Seymour.
70s. That
Yeah,
sounds like
it
a
might have been the
70s movie.
70s, but
It
yeah,
sounds
that's the
like a
first
70s
movie
movie.
with Jane Seymour I'd ever seen, and it was weird.
First one I ever saw was Live and Let Die. That was the first time I ever saw Jane Seymour. Was in the James Bond movie there. But so all right, so set up the whole story now of what's going on. So it starts really pretty grisly with a whole mass of executions with the guillotine, and right away it's fairly obvious that when we see Percy in disguise, that's our hero. There's no question immediately. Oh, this is our guy sneaking these people out in caskets.
Yeah.
And
I think they do a very good job with the cinematography of showing you, yes, this is an important person that you need to focus on, even though his entire makeup, his entire identity at that point is trying to be stand out. He's supposed to not be a big deal, trying to not stand out. And I love his disguises throughout the film.
They're
But,
very
yeah,
good, very convincing. He does, and he alters his accent enough that it's believable. Even when he's the old woman, it still works.
The old woman's really good. My favorite is the hunchback at the end, especially with how he does the magic trick for the boy.
Yeah. And the movie starts off in a good point because it pulls you into the history. You see the horror of the Reign of Terror. And got to remember, this is 1792. The French took their inspiration from our revolution, but
do a very good job at it.
they lacked the brilliance of our forefathers who built a structure before going to war. And when the French went to war, and of course it's a completely different thing. The aristocracy, the nobility, wasn't actually living on American soil. They were in England.
Yeah, they were far away.
We were not tempted to destroy them. And in fact, it wasn't even about destroying them. It was just basically leave us alone. As opposed to the French, which had been living under aristocracy for hundreds, thousands of years. The French nobility were disgusting. They were horrible. They treated they did what most European aristocracies did. They ignored the plight of their people.
They were all starving to death.
Yeah, it's something that was repeated 120 years later in Russia with Tsarist Russia, where the people were starving, and it allowed another type of corrupt militancy to take over and birth Marxism, communism.
Well,
but
an interesting parallel between those two is their choice of every citizen, every comrade, every person in these countries had to have these titles, like the citizen and papers. But yes, the existence of citizen and comrade always stood out to me with the comparison between those two countries and their two great falls.
And to me, that's why this is a fascinating snapshot of history. they had a revolution, but they had nothing to take its place. So it was chaos and horror and mob rule, anarchy almost, with people pretending to be citizens, which is why it was so easy for Napoleon to take over. Because suddenly you have a strong personality like that. I know we're tangenting, but this is history. I got to talk about it. You have a powerful personality like Napoleon who can then just sweep in and gather followers and gain more and more power and have military backing. And suddenly, oh, guess what? You're back to an empire again. You're not a republic. You're an empire with an emperor because you didn't have a structure in place, a plan in mind, a document like the Declaration of Independence, like the Constitution, to build a true republic, which is what our fair nation is here in America. It is a constitutional republic. They just called it a republic, but they had no rules. It was just grabbing power, forming communities, and Robespierre ruling like a dictator until Napoleon swept in and took over. And see, you're smiling because it's true. I love it.
It's absolutely true. And Robespierre always was an interesting figure to me growing up, and his dictatorship is insane. How much power he seized, and the comparisons go on from there. It's a power vacuum, and if you're not prepared for a power vacuum, it leads to chaos. I mean, just look at Germany between the world wars and the rise of a certain mustache dude, man.
Yeah, and that's a whole. But then there's the other equation of people being brutal to the conquered country. That's one of the reasons Germany was so, because the other European nations after World War I demeaned them so much, they broke the German people down into losing all pride, all faith in themselves and the country, which is why the certain mustached man was able to sweep in with a nationalistic type of idea and rally them to his brown shirted rule. And in the French Revolution, it's a similar thing. There's chaos and there's people rallying around the violence because they're so swept up in their broken nature, which is why they were attracted to it. Oh, let's take out our anger on this. And it was a horror show. And it's one thing to, let's say, execute the actual dukes, counts, marquises, all those types of things. But then, I'm sorry, marquises are dukes. Sorry, I forget. And marquises are dukes. The counts and the marquises. But to kill their wives and their children,
that's when the line in the sand was drawn.
Exactly.
Well, and something that I was talking about with Rachel, because she saw the film for the first time yesterday with me, is the fact that how big of a deal it was for them to kill the king, King Louis. Like, that just had such a big impact on the Scarlet Pimpernel and his whole team, because at least the way that I understand history, you can of course correct me because you have a further knowledge of this period than I do. Killing a king is a massive deal.
Regicide is big because this is a period of time built upon a foundation that kings, emperors, czars, they're chosen by God, chosen by God, and they have they are ruling in God's name. Especially, I mean, this is France, so this is Catholicism right here. So it's back heavy Catholicism.
And the moment that they're willing to go to regicide is the moment that they are capable of anything, that there is no line that they won't cross, at least according to their society and their culture. And that's why they reacted so strongly to it, why they went to go save that boy as soon as they did. But there's so many interesting things about that.
And then they converted. But even during that, they went away from Catholicism during this time. They became what's the term? Begins with a J. I just forgot it.
J.
But the religion, the way they were worshiping, began with a J in that. I forget what it was. Jacobins. What was Jacobin? Might be Jacobins.
Jacobean.
Yeah. Well, that's the French over. And what happened was, to reflect it, England was extremely afraid that the activity of the peasantry was going to incite their own peasantry in England, because they were just fresh off the Revolutionary War. England is not in a great place. I mean, they don't really reflect that in this movie, but in reality, there was a lot of fear that there would be a similar revolt in England, which is why they took some measures in England to try and crack down on stuff, and it was and the nobility, the gentleman class of the time were turning into basically merchant kings because they were
Mhm.
in their power to control. So it's a real
Well, and there's other examples that they were worried about beyond just the revolution. Like, what was it, a century before when they had Oliver Cromwell or whatever his name was, and Guy Fawkes, and like they
Mhm.
had
Yeah,
near revolution several times. So yeah,
yeah,
this wasn't just let's rescue these people. Like the English had a very
yeah.
important interest in this
And
revolution.
in a couple short years from this movie, French and English go to war.
Hmm.
They go to war, and it's because we've talked about it. We covered it when we were doing that other
Stormboy.
series. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we just talk about it there. So this is a tumultuous period, and it's truly fascinating to watch a story like this, which is a pocket story. It takes place over what a few weeks. The
Yeah,
story,
it's
a
pretty
few weeks.
condensed.
Yeah, takes over 3 weeks, and it's a pocket example. The rescuing of the Dauphin to get him out of there, to get him into Austria, with the dream of restoring the French ability, which doesn't happen because Napoleon wipes all that out. And it's also a what I do like about this movie is it's a nice little snapshot of relationships and how a man like Percy can fall head over heels for Marguerite and think he's going to give everything to her, but then the duplicity of Chauvin, he then makes Marguerite look like a villain, and suddenly a man who's mad in love with her can't trust her. And it's a very well laid out human
Mhm.
condition play, and that's why I think Ian McKellen does so well because it's very Shakespearean, which is
Mhm.
why
Oh,
I think he
absolutely.
was able to adapt himself because he's a classically trained Shakespearean actor, so he could get into it and really dive into that type of villainous role. So that's why that's why this works, I think,
Mhm.
in terms of the older. That's why this works the most because of the character, the interplay between all the characters, or at
Mhm.
least for me, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with that, and their dialogue is just so strong that
Mhm.
I haven't seen this movie in probably a decade, maybe not quite that long, but it's been a very long time. But I immediately fell back into it. I knew the lines as they were coming. I remembered them, could match their delivery. And one of my favorite deliveries from Ian McKellen is at the end of the movie when he's defeated, when he's got Percy's sword to his throat. He's like, "Oh, the English with their
Fair
stupid
play.
sense of fair play." I've always remembered his delivery
Mhm.
from that moment, and there's so
Yeah.
many other great examples of it from
Yeah.
him and Percy in particular. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very strong cast,
And
very
here
strong cast.
I want to drop a little bit of trivia that I don't think you probably know. So, do you know who plays the Prince Regent, His Highness in England?
I do not.
Oh, it is one Julian Fellows, the creator of Downton Abbey.
Really?
And when he is when they arrive at at his ball, he sees welcoming the Lord Grantham and his daughters, and that is the noble family we follow in Downton Abbey, the Granthams. So, hey, there you go. There's a little bit of trivia, guys. Julian Fellows probably got the inspiration to use the Granthams when he was in this movie when he did Downton Abbey. So there you
Maybe.
go. Little bit of trivia. I have no thought to back it up. I'm just going on the facts and logic when I see this movie. Julian Fellows saying, Lord and Lady Grantham and your daughters, welcome. Like, well, hey, whoa, it's Julian Fellows. Okay. So he's going to make Downton Abbey in 40 years. So, or, yeah, in 40 years. He's going to make Downton Abbey 40 years. And so there you go, guys. Enjoy that little bit of interesting trivia for this. But yeah, so it's, as we go through this, it's, as you said, it's basically a very simple tale. It's a rescue. It's a constant rescue mission for the nobles, and culminating in the rescue of Prince Louis, the Dauphin, and then of course interwoven with the relationship. So how should we go about doing this now? Do we just want to talk about the different parts here then of how it moves along?
Yeah, there's only so many ways you can do it because it
Hmm.
is a simple story, and I do believe
Yeah,
that there are problems with it, especially with contrivances. There
yeah.
are several big coincidences and contrivances, but
There are some pacing problems too in this. It
mhm,
drags on definitely in the second act, and I feel like they could have maybe cut 20, 30 minutes off this
probably.
easy. Just because I know it's a lot. All the stuff is usually set up, but I just think it could have been contracted a little bit, and to move the pacing because you know what it is. I think there was too many rescue missions in between the Dauphin. They could have cut out a whole. They could have cut a whole rescue mission. I think, or at least refer or showed a quick part of it to have the ramifications of Ian McKellen closing in on everybody, getting closer and putting all the pieces together. That's my feeling about the pacing. That's one of my criticisms of it.
I think probably the part that it drags the most for me is when they're in England and just like not a whole lot is happening from when they get to England to where Percy and his wife, have that interaction in the library. Just not a whole lot happens. It's just like, these are British noblemen. Let's dance. Let's have fun. And it is distracting.
They went to England so that Marguerite could be accused of being an informer in France, just so that they could drive. It's all done to drive the wedge between further because he already is wary of her when right after they get married, when he learns about her involvement with it, and it's just those scenes are just there to drive the wedge further so that she can have her emotional breakdown, and it's good. But after that, move on. Let's jump to let's move on with the crux of the whole story, and we don't need them dancing around each other, showing their lack of it, showing his. I don't want to say lack of attachment, but because he still says I'm madly in love with her, but his distancing. We didn't need all that because in a movie, it's one thing to do it in a TV show where you're pacing yourself for episodes, but in a movie, it slowed down too much for me right in that one point. And I would have liked it to sped up because once we get to the third act and everybody is now dancing around because now Percy realizes that I'm just going to say Ian McKellen because I don't want to pronounce it wrong. Even though I have a good pronunciation of shit, I don't want to say it wrong. Ian McKellen's closing in, and Jane Seymour as Marguerite is now really caught between everything. Once it's all set up, it moves fine in the third act where she has to decide, do I betray my brother? Do I betray my husband? What am I going to do? Do I betray the faith I have in who the Scarlet Pimpernel is and represents? That's all working great. And then Ian McKellen hunting him down, finding the earring and corrupting and blackmailing. It's all going really well there. And Percy sleeping, playing the fop even harder to try and throw off the scent. It's all working. I just wish we'd gotten there faster.
I agree.
Yeah.
We could have spent more time with the climax because when we do get there eventually, it's underwhelming, not just because of the fight scene, but everything on that little island castle.
I was wondering listen, it's predictable how it's going to. We're going to get a happy ending. This, even though I reference it's very Shakespearean, this isn't going to be a Shakespearean ending where everybody dies or everybody but one person dies. Yeah, this was going to be a happy ending. They spent too much time on their romance, this and that, and Percy's cleverness to have him not get out of this. For me, it was just a question of how is he going to get out of this? And as I said earlier, it's really predictable on how everything's going to go down. I say it's predictable because he'd already done the officer swap move in a previous in his last. That's why I say, actually, maybe I need to correct myself. Honestly, they needed the old woman scene because that sets up the officer swap. They needed the old woman.
That's why I say the English stuff would probably be the better place to cut stuff out because that old woman portrayal he does is just great.
Yeah.
And
it's set up for the officer swap so that we know that he can do that, which he does in the end. That's how he gets out of it. And yes, I guess you see, there is a lot of setup and payoff if you're paying attention. So I agree. The English stuff is weird there. So, but we get to that. And so he's going to probably swap out the officers. I knew it was going to happen. I'm thinking, there's no way. There's no way he's surrounded by a firing squad and not getting out of it unless they're his men. So it was obviously his men. And I wasn't expecting a duel. I thought the way this was going to end, because the way the movie had gone in general, without a lot of action set pieces, that it was just going to be a witty, clever ruse to get out of everything. And once he had turned the tables on Ian McKellen and had it all in his hand, I thought it was just going to be, we're going to tie him up, throw him in the closet, and get out of here on the boat. But no, we got a fencing scene.
We did.
Got a fencing scene, which wasn't bad. It was well choreographed because Ian McKellen. I'm pretty sure it was Ian McKellen the whole time. I was trying to watch the camera work. Listen, this is a 1982, well, not 82 DVDs, but this is a pressing of a 1980 thing. The quality, not the best. Not the best. Not the worst.
No.
It's a solid 480p. And I'm watching everything. I'm pretty sure it was Ian McKellen doing his own choreography. I wasn't sure if it was Andrews doing his own choreography and the fencing the whole time, though. I couldn't quite tell in a couple of quick cuts of that, but it was well choreographed, and I appreciated it. But I agree with you; it's a little anticlimactic because Percy was in complete control the whole time. I never felt as though Ian McKellen was a threat, especially when he starts cutting off buttons.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing with that fight is I wanted Ian McKellen to be a formidable force. So this was, could it go one way or another? Of course, we all know which way it's going to end up in the end, but he's playing with him, so that's not a climactic conclusion.
That's what drew me out. While I'm appreciating the choreography, I'm losing interest because I'm not compelled. Because
there's no stakes.
You literally, he's playing with him, he's toying with him, he's not in any danger.
It needed music, that scene, the fight.
I love
the theme song. I'm sure we'll get to it.
It's memorable, but it's an earbug. It gets stuck in your head. You remember that thing. I've heard it for many years in the background when my mom was watching it. And yes, it is there. It's a memorable theme. It's the only thing I remember from the movie, though, theme-wise. I don't remember any other tracks from it. But yeah, so it is a I think you just used the word, not anticlimactic, but underwhelming. It's underwhelming.
Very underwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's coming from someone who adores this film. If I were rating this subjectively, I have so much nostalgia for it that I'd give it a near perfect score. Of course, there are a lot of issues with it, though, some of which are just because of the budget. This was a TV movie, so it's not going to...
That's why it felt like a mini series, because it was a TV movie. Yeah.
There were built-in commercial breaks.
Yeah, because it does fade to black many times, and it cuts me not it, but it's got that charm to it, and it's a certain charm, a certain production. But you know why it still works? Because everybody took it seriously. Nobody phoned it in. They weren't leaning. They leaned into some of the cheesy aspects of it, and also it's the production value is high. The costuming, right there. The hairstyles, because because of the era that Marguerite, Jane Seymour, and every other one, those are all wigs. Even though it's Jane Seymour's right hair color, that's a wig, but it's obvious because the French wore wigs back then. The English wore wigs back then. It was an era of wig wearing. So even though
you wear wigs,
even though it's, I think I do.
The Lord of the Rings press tour reference from John McMonahan with Elijah Wood.
No, I didn't get that. I didn't.
Now
I know the thing. He did it because they were doing it blind and it was audio. I've seen that. Yeah,
I love that clip.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. It was so even though you're seeing these massive wigs and you're realizing I want to see real hair, no, this is proper period or accuracy. They all wore these massive wigs. It was just how it was, and it looks right. It feels right. It smells right. And they get that. That's why you forgive the slight campiness to it, because they leaned into it and they committed to it. And as we've said, the performances, boom. Everybody who is a main protagonist in there, a main part of the story, they delivered an excellent outing that I am not really critical of anybody's performances whatsoever.
No, even from the supporting cast, like Armand, Jane Seymour's brother, his performance always stood out to me a lot, especially after his turn when he realized what was happening was wrong. Because he was indoctrinated. He was full on Revolutionary Republic, gung-ho assistant at that point. But once he grew up a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's a little character from it, and everybody, even though there's not massive character arcs in this, it's just basically hero. Female
love interest.
Thank you, love interest. I was looking for the word, couldn't find it. Love interest and antagonist and all the hardy fellows who follow our hero, and then a few other side pieces and characters.
I will say that I often criticize a lot of these old movies. I don't criticize, maybe it's the wrong word, but I'm not usually a fan of the love at first sight romances. I find them a little cheap and empty, like Legend, for example, or that might not be the right example, but we've done it in the past.
Yeah.
This one, I do have a problem with. He literally sees her, falls in love with her immediately.
But
The
he
only
did
reason
court
that
her. He courted
Yes, he
her.
did court her, but the only reason that it's okay and works for me, at least, is because of the performances. It is just so good. Like, he's in the shadows, he's in the background doing Percy, playing the fool, and then he stands up, and you just see this change as soon as he sees Jane Seymour.
That was good. That was a good moment.
Yeah,
right
the
there.
mask drops, and
Yeah.
I love that moment.
And their conversation. One day, I want to see past. She recognizes he's wearing a mask of personality, and I want to get to know. He says, "Well, if you marry me, you can get to know me." It's like, well, hey, all right. And you got to realize this is France and this is England. There were no even at this point, because they weren't nobility. Yeah, everybody's free to F.
Oh yeah,
before they're married.
I mean, they talk about that one chick's boudoir, and it's like, oh yeah, I've got his cousin in here.
Yeah,
They are not subtle.
It's France, especially. There was a lot of. I mean, famously, during the Revolutionary War, Ben Franklin, when he was courting the French nobility for support, oh, he was a randy boy. Good old Benji Franklin. He was a randy boy, getting it on with all the French aristocracy back in the day. Then, so there in France, in England, not so much. In England, there was still a level of proper behavior. If you got with somebody, you got to get married.
Yeah.
If you took somebody to bed and she ain't a whore, you got to marry her. In France, oh no,
they're pretty
everybody's.
loose. I mean, there were official titles at court for mistresses. I mean, Madame de Pompadour, if you remember that Doctor Who episode, that's how I know her from. She was the official mistress of the king. It's an actual position in court.
Courtesans were a thing. So but that's just the brilliant dissection of different cultures of the period. Even though they all have the same, even though a lot of times, as the history goes on, all these different families were related to each other. You got to remember, the eventually English royalty was related to Russian royalty, and here and so forth, and German royalty. I mean, that's one of the reasons World War happens, because the Kaiser is jealous of Queen Victoria, his aunt. He wants her power. He wants to be like her. So eventually, all these great royal families are connected. So there's it all. Even though they're all connected, eventually the different cultures all have different beliefs and actions, and that's why it's fascinating to look at all this stuff. That's why I love history. It's entertaining, and there's so many stories to tell, and this is just another one of them, a snapshot. And as we said, it's a simple story. There's not a real lot of depth to this. The depth of the story comes from the emotional interactions. To me, that's where the depth of this movie comes from. Where Marguerite is devastated that that her husband Percy, her man she's in love with, has distanced himself from her. Percy is devastated that he can't entrust his greatest secrets with her, because needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. It's one of those situations. And so that interplay is great. The dastardly behavior of Ian McKellen's character, that's the heart of this movie, and that's why this movie works in the end for me. And all right, so let's see. Do I have anything else? I don't think I have anything I want to say, honestly.
Well, there's two moments I want to briefly talk about. We won't have to say a whole lot about them, but I think they're examples of the two worst parts of this movie from a writing standpoint. They are massive, massive coincidences. The first of which is when Percy just happens to be walking down the exact road where Armand is getting beat up by
getting assaulted. Yeah.
And then
I can see that.
He's the assistant of the primary man who's hunting the Scarlet Pimpernel, the brother of the woman that he falls in love with. Like, Armand is at the center of all this, and they just happen to meet, and it leads to all of this. It's too.
I can see that.
Coincidental. Like, if he just fell in love with this guy's sister, totally fine. But it's how close he's connected to Ian McKellen's character, how the woman he falls in love with is in a pseudo relationship with the man who's trying to hunt him as well. Like, it's just like gets so tangled so quickly from this one massive coincidence. And the other one, throughout the film, it's very established that Percy is an incredibly intelligent man and that he works so hard to conceal his Scarlet Pimpernel identity to an insane degree. I mean, like the ring is kind of funny how it like rotates. I think that was a good
It's
idea.
a Dakota ring, man.
But the scene that I have a problem with is right when Jane Seymour is at the end of her rope, her husband's missing, her brother is likely to be killed soon. She goes into the library to read a note, and suddenly all around her are Pimpernels.
Well,
like-
the thing is, when she asked him to touch her to know he was real.
Yeah,
she felt the ring, and then she's looking up at the portrait and she sees the ring, and that's when she makes the connection.
If she made the connection in the library because it is her husband, totally get that. That's all good. But just he left so many clues to Pimpernels in his public room in his house. I just feel like that's counterproductive to the intelligent character building that we've done with him in the past. It's not just, in this painting, he's got a Scarlet Pimpernel ring. There's Pimpernels on the wall, in seals.
Actually, no, that it's not necessarily the ring. It's just because the ring rotates. So it's just the family ring on the one side. And
in the portrait, it's rotated to the flower side.
It is? Oh, I missed that.
Yes.
I missed
that's
that.
That's what I mean.
I
that's
didn't
what I
see
have
that.
a problem with.
I just saw the ring
flower.
in the portrait. I didn't see that.
It's flower out, and then there's a bunch of other flowers around the room she sees. That just seems so against the intelligent person that's been developed. If she figures it out, if she sees just the family side out on the portrait and puts two and two together,
yeah. See, that's what I thought, because I glanced away in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am sitting right here at my computer, and I literally was at times going like this out of the computer. And because I missed that part. So what I saw is she touches the shoulder, and he touches her shoulder, and she feels the ring, which she would recognize as her husband. The feeling of the two jewels on the top, and then when she was looking around the library. I didn't pick up the flowers. I guess I wasn't paying attention. But then I saw her glance at the portrait, and the portrait clearly had the pinky ring on, which means it's the pinky ring. And now she realizes that she just touched the pinky ring. So that's when she makes the connection.
Yeah.
So I missed the flowers part.
If that were the case, that would be totally fine. That is her being intelligent and figuring it out. But as it stands, it's a bunch of clues left in a public room. If Servant or Ian McKellen had ever come over to their house and gone into that room, he could have figured it out.
He did go into that room. He did go into the room because that's where he found the earring.
No. He found the earring in the library at the palace. That's a different room.
No. I thought that's where
he found the earring at the party. The library where.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I'm confusing scenes. Scenes.
Those were
different scenes. Sorry, different scenes.
Yeah, the library was at the palace where the party was going on. And that's where he found the ring. But when he came over to threaten her in an earlier scene, that was a different room, I believe. But if he never walked in that room, he could have been like, "Oh, there's flowers, Scarlet Pimpernels everywhere. Percy must be the Scarlet Pimpernel." It just seems like Percy would be more cautious than that because he keeps the mask up in England as much as he does in France.
Yeah.
It's a 24/7 disguise for him. So it just felt like a fool's plot where someone had to act incredibly dumb just to progress the plot.
I can see it. See, I missed it. I was like I said, I must have been glancing away, and I didn't see all the flower stuff, but all right. Well, that's fair. So soundtrack, as we mentioned, the theme is memorable. It sticks with you. The rest of it, I don't particularly remember any of it. Honestly.
It doesn't stand out, but I don't think any of it contradicts or harms the scenes.
No. It's just it's scene music, but it's not memorable scene music. But the theme is legitimately memorable. It's stuck in your head for a while, and whenever you hear it, you will realize, oh, Scarlet Pimpernel. It will instantly make you think of the movie because it's prevalent in the opening, and it's prevalent whenever he does a Pimpernel move, and it's the final moment, the final tune you hear the movie's over. All right, with that all said, then Jed, it is your week, so go ahead and rate away, score it.
Okay, so this, like I said earlier, I have a whole lot of nostalgia for this film, so I'd like to rate it higher than I'm going to, but I have to realize that there are plot issues, there are some pacing issues, nothing that I can really see as a flaw in the performances, though. There would carry this film, and the dialogue, I think, is very strong for the most part, so I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I'm right there with you. 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I don't feel like my time was wasted. I enjoyed the performances, but I know it's 1982. They didn't put a lot of time into it, but I can't help but put it up against other period pieces of that
Mhm.
time where I feel as though are even better of that. But what
Mhm.
saves this for me is the performances. Everybody does a great job. I enjoy it. Jane Seymour is smoking hot. Her cleavage is presented basically 85-90% of the movie. And it's generally an enjoyable flick. It's a nice little heroic, romantic type of fairy tale where the hero does the best he can. He outwits the villains, gets the girl in the end, and we get a little sword fight in the end. Which is, even though it was an underwhelming sword fight, I do appreciate fencing. I am a sword nut.
Mhm.
And that being that,
Important
I recommend
question:
this. Yeah.
Would you watch it again?
Probably just for company, not
Mm.
actually sit down and watch it, but it's something that I wouldn't mind having on in the background if
Mhm.
I'm doing other stuff. Because uh, this type of movie, once you see it, I can see it without looking at it. I can see the imagery, I can see the scenes. It's not that hard to see what's going on by hearing what's going on. That's a plus of the movie. The dialogue is so tight and the performance is so on key that you can hear the performances and see it without actually seeing it. So it it's a good movie.
Mhm.
And technically it is in my library because I have access to my mom's library and I can get it whenever I want. So it is owned, and I recommend it. It's a
Mhm.
good movie. And I recommend other movies because I'm thinking about my next choice of movies because we're going now into May. We are off next week, guys, because Jed's going out of town. So we're off next weekend. But when we come back for the remainder of May, because it's Star Wars month and we're coming up on Star Wars Day, which actually lines up with Saturday Night Drive-In on May 25th, we're going to be watching the prequel trilogy. We're going to talk prequel trilogy. We're going to Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith. And then in June, it will be my official pick again, and we'll go back. So I'm thinking about another period piece around the French Revolution. So join us for that in 2 weeks. We'll start Prequel Tuesday, and we'll try to get some guests for that because I'm sure a lot of prequel fans out there will want to jump in on that conversation. So once again, thank you all for watching across both chats. We appreciate each and every one of you. And hit that like button, subscribe to our channels, and we will see you guys next time. Until then, guys, take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be.